The Inquisitor and the Rebel. Titan Amories' eyes glowed blue, the glare from his monitor burning like some strange sun on his sunglasses, whilst he finished off a long day of performing data crunching and analysis of production levels in the Delta Quadrant. Not exactly thrilling stuff, he thought to himself, but if it pays my wages, it pays my wages. And I couldn't be thankful at least that, in times such as these. Looking out his window, he observed the scene below him as he stood on high in his administration-class government apartment. Green lights glowed and pulsated in the distance on the streets below, people milling and moving like schools of fish post-rush hour, the insane rhythm of the city. Time for rest, Titan muttered to himself, before shutting down his government issues interface, severing his connection to the all-seeing eye. The world was in chains, but the machinery was all they knew. "You have no idea how wrong you are, Melanie," Brechstein exclaimed, his wild, fuzzy afro bobbing around as he spoke in harsh tones, his bulbous eyes seeming to pop out of his skull, glaring intently at her through his thick-rimmed glasses as he spoke in harsh tones, gesticulating towards her aggressively with his spindly long arms. Melanie was sat in the corner, frequenting her favourite cafe, the Dull Flame. She was a thin, female-like woman with jet black hair, her eyes the colour of deep amber, such that they seemed to burn with the intensity of her anarchist convictions. The only route to change has to come from an international movement, a raising of consciousness, you see. Once the oppressed masses' consciousness reaches that peak level, then we can take back the reins of power. Brechstein continued his monologue. "But," said Melanie, her voice raising slightly with an initial tone of nervousness, "how can we connect with the masses when they are so placated? Talk to your man on the street about your grand theories, Brechstein, and you'll find the common man could care less about the abstractions, the endless miring and factionalism. A new society must be founded on common shared values. Yes, a radicalism, but not a radicalism divorced from pragmatism and shared ideals." She snorted. "You know I like you really, Brechstein, but sometimes I think you wear your radicalism as a sort of badge of honour, and it can get damn tiresome at times," Melanie said, reeling off the lines like clockwork as she took another sip of her half-finished beer. Brechstein looked at her with his usual disengaged expression, though his shifting eyes betrayed a certain discomfort. "Well, we are comrades, Melanie, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But I think having these sort of debates is exactly our strength, not like the technocrats. The flattening of hierarchy is by its very nature a difficult and fraught process." "Well, comrade, on that we can agree," Melanie nodded. A mechanical alarm blared out its loud siren in Titan's sparse mineral flat, waking him up instantly from his slumber with a sudden jolt, as he proceeded to drag himself up from his bedsheets to his desk and the interface, his rock of Sisyphus as he often thought of it. After a quick coffee, Titan switched on the copper mechanical interface with a switch on the side and listened to the comforting hum as it began to spring into life. 1,000 mechanical gears and wires whirring and churning into action as the interface came into life once more. A grainy eye appeared on the monitor as it did every morning, the all-seeing eye of the Overseer. "Titan, give glory to our Overseer, and see to it that the work is done," muttered the machine in its melancholic melody of mechanization. The beady eye that knows all, sees all. Titan had to admit, though only ever in his private internal thoughts, that at first he was uncomfortable with the extent of the surveillance that the bureaucracy had imposed on the people after the Great Reformation. But he had an inbuilt trust in power and authority. He was a bureaucrat by nature or design after all, and if there's one thing a bureaucrat knows, it's to trust in the efficiency of the system. The system, he thought, was a monolith which constantly delivers, a source of knowledge and truth. He would play these mind games with himself, running the reasons over and over, but deep down he felt he knew that it was all necessary, for without the order of their overseer, chaos would once more reign in the hearts of men. Titan had seen what men were capable of when order was not the prevailing system. Still, to this day, when he closed his eyes and played his slideshow of memories, He could recall the sight of the city in flames. He could see the cathedral he ran to with his mother to hide from the armies of counter-revolutionary forces that stormed throughout the city. The smell of soot and death lingering in the air. The terror etched on his mother's face as they ran for shelter. Explosions reverberating through the streets. The sounds of shots firing in the air under an acrid sky burning red. Things were not perfect, he thought, but they had been much worse in recent history. Better the devil you know than the dragon of chaos. The overseer was a wise man after all, and his cybernetic knowledge had granted him and an elite few with the ability to at least make life better for most, if not all. Data crunching and cybernetic communism was their path, their golden path to a better tomorrow, and it was worth every sacrifice to make it a true reality. Titan knew he was an ideologue on some level, that he had sacrificed himself to the big idea, but he felt safe, calm even in the face of the world now, and he derived some sense of meaning from his place in it. Titan pulled the lever in front of him to activate his data crunching analysis, and awaited his task for the day. Melanie was walking down the road to her campus, the Gamma University, a specialist campus dedicated to the development of open-minded intellectuals in name, but in practice just another factory for the administrative class, producing obedient and efficient analysts, engineers and propagandists for the state. Melanie was taking the political science and philosophy course, but she was disengaged and felt lost. Its restrictive and censored curriculum frustrating her time and time again. "Ah, Melanie, hello," shouted a voice from over the road, as Melanie took her earphones off to see where their voice was coming from. "Ah, hey Marsha," explained Melanie as she looked up, recognising her friend's distinctive green hair and neutral toned clothes, which gave her a look of a sort of mix of a healer and a rebel. "Are you on the way to Dr. Trent's lecture on the importance of ideological purity in contemporary communist theory?" "I surely wish I wasn't, but I am," responded Melanie, a look of feigned disinterest in her eyes, almost disgust. "You don't sound too excited," said Marsha, looking almost hurt as if Melanie had personally insulted her. "Do you get excited by those lectures, really?" Melanie scoffed with a tone of bemusement. "If Dr. Trent is delivering them, hell, why? Yeah, I do," Marsha almost sang. Christ, thought Melanie, before begrudgingly walking into the large lecture theatre to study. Hours of drudgery passed for Titan as he darted around virtual space, on autopilot, analysing and surveying datasets involving production levels, statistical analysis of grain production, analysis of steel production in the Gamma region, the usual humdrum business of the technocratic state. But for now, it was time to lunch, for lunch, to momentarily unplug from the mass machine and unwind. Titan looked out his window as rain began to pour on the landscape before him. He hadn't been outside for several days, and with this weather, it did not look so inviting. But he could do with a little exercise, and decided to visit his local cafe around the corner. A small slice of rare bohemia in a world of grey. The Dull Flame. The door opened with a swing as Titan pushed his way in through the crowded interior. It was a shabby but interesting space full of old ancient things he did not know the names of, paintings and photos by long forgotten or dead artists adorning the walls, as well as an extensive collection of beer, cider and any spirit that there was a name for. It was this mix of unique atmosphere and joviality that meant the Dull Flame was a popular gathering spot for many radicals and artists who would come here to get drunk, get merry and have long-winded, convoluted debates late into the night. He always felt a little out of place here, though everyone in general was accepted here as long as they paid for drinks and didn't bother anyone too much. Titan felt like this place was his little escape, and he'd often take a book to read for an hour or two, the one he clutched today being a compilation of pre-war horror tales. It was always horror that compelled his imagination, perhaps because it helped him confront his own demons, the cathedral they ran to from shelter from the shells, the explosions, the screams of broken body and flesh, the fierce vigour and violence of a society in revolt. He settled down and began his reading before suddenly he heard a commotion developing in the corner, and he lowered his book to listen in. "Brexton, you bastard!" A woman's voice rang out with a passionate roar of anger and disillusion. "You deluded, self-centered, self-righteous prig. I have no words for how much I hold you in contempt, you contemptible slug." The woman wasn't mincing her words. She was pissed. Titan looked around the corner to take a peek at what was going on. That macabre human curiosity to look where one shouldn't. A woman, tall and thin, with jet black hair, was staring and pointing intently at a scrawny-looking man with glasses. And Titan had the intuition that this man indeed was a monumental prick. He almost smelt of the arrogance and pretension that marked some of the crowd that gathered in here. A feeling like he was trying too hard to be something he desperately wanted to believe he was. But in truth, he was not. Everyone's seeing it apart from him. He mumbled something to the woman, averting her angry gaze, which seemed to only inflame her more, her dagger stare speaking more than 1,000,000 verses by a poet. Titan got the feeling that she detested this man, that he was a nemesis. Titan observed them further, thinking that they had probably known each other for a long time, but whilst they may have once tolerated each other like a slightly bad odour, now the gloves had indeed come off. "Marcia told me what you did, you pig. You won't be seeing me again. You don't deserve to see me again. I hate you." Titan felt strangely drawn to her fiery figure as she stood over the man, given the dressing down of a lifetime. He smiled wryly to himself, excited by her presence and spirit. It was a feeling he had not felt for a time. A certain zeal and zest for life, the spirit of higher living which had evaded him for so long. He closed his eyes and imagined her naked, lying beneath him in a half-lit room. Imagine her thin, smooth body heaving on top of him, her breathing uncoiled as he imagined her gorging himself on her nipples. All saliva, filthy sex, passion and after-sex cigarettes. Well, this is all quite perverted, of course, he knew, but it was pretty standard for Titan. It had been a while, to say the least. And hey, what's wrong with just thinking about it? It was then that Titan decided to take a risk. He was starved for fun, and this girl looked like she could provide some of it. Trouble too, perhaps, but Titan in his previous life was all about that, and he wanted to revisit it, to feel the rush of taking risks and running into the unknown. He had to draw her attention somehow or break the ice, and so his mind wandered as to how. Could he be a white knight and intervene? Perhaps he could play it cool, approach her after the confrontation with a stuck-up wannabe renegade. He decided to be old-fashioned, and chose the former. Not a subtle strategy, but he thought it would be the best way to make a lasting impression, and she'd appreciate a man taking action and being direct, as opposed to being passive and meek, he thought to himself. So Titan walked up to their table, Melanie not noticing him at first, absorbed as she was, gesticulating towards the scrawny man before her. Titan took in a breath and decided to speak, approaching the table they were standing around slowly before uttering in an assertive, blunt tone. "Alright mate, we've got a problem here," with a particular emphasis on the mate. "Who are you?" the pretentious Moor replied with disdain. "Titan, and what have you been doing to annoy this young woman?" Titan responded, looking directly now at Melanie for the first time, her eyes meeting him as she looked at him with an expression that lingered somewhere between utter bewilderment, amusement, and anger. She looked almost shell-shocked or frozen somehow before she snapped out of it and spoke. "He's just another ragtag revolutionary," she snorted, glaring at Brechstein. "Another radical, faking it to get laid." She stared at him with a Medusa stare. "You will never see me or Marcia again," before storing up some poison in preparation for a final blow. "You massive cunt." The tension rippled in the air, Brechstein turning white as a sheet like she had punched him in the face with force. As Titan started chuckling mischievously, Brechstein had been given a verbal smackdown he would not soon forget. They both left the cafe in silence, Titan glancing quickly at Melanie, almost scanning her person as he looked at her. Quick, short glances in her direction which she did not yet perceive. He got the impression of a radical personality from her, almost an opposite to his conformist grey soul, the skin he felt trapped in. Her hair flowed like dark waves from her head, waves of cosmic soul. "So," Titan said quietly, I am Titan. And you? Melanie glared at him with narrowed eyes. And who, may I ask, is asking? She responded with a slight acid in her voice. But I told you, did I not? Titan retorted, almost taken aback by her abruptness. Well, as I said, I'm Titan. She chuckled in an all sarcastic manner. I did not mean your name. I meant your place in all this trash. A policeman, a secret agent, some other pig of the state. I'd say I'm none of these. I'm a cog in a great machine. An analyst only. A great nobody. What about you? One of these ragtag idealists who hang out the dull flame, I suppose. Titan responded back with a similar sarcastic barbed venom. So you're another pig that takes orders, she bluntly responded. Well, pig clerk, thank you for your existence in that case, but I can assure you I can more than handle myself in such situations. And I need no more knocks on my door late at night. I would rather that we part, so if you permit me to leave. Titan paused for a second, stopping suddenly on the grim, concrete pavement. He looked down at Melanie, burning there in a deluded anarchist freedoms, and felt a strange sensation. Almost a sort of admiration for her sheer pig-headedness. She wandered off down the rain-lit neon streets, her figure shining bright like bright neon billboards in the void. Titan hoped he would bump into her again, and somehow he was sure of it. It was a typical midweek lull as Titan finished off his analysis on the latest batch of data had been sent at the start of the week. Remarkably, ahead of schedule, he was in a good routine as he worked hard, daydreaming of Melanie, her hair, her anarchist spirit which stirred something deep within him, that revolutionary he hid so well, perhaps because he was aware of its true destructive power. Revolution was a Pandora's box. You had to be sure when you opened it that you were truly aware of its true power, as there is no revolution without death. This was the one truth that could be discerned from the history of revolutions. The foundations of all revolutions historically seem to be built on the burial mounds of the previous order. If you are not willing to kill to defend the revolution, Titan thought to himself, then don't even bother lighting the first flame. Long hours Titan spent lost in such philosophical pontifications as his restless mind began to start feeling instead of processing, in order to examine and probe his alienation, his anxiety. Could they change it? The Overseer had sacrificed so much to bring us to where we are, from where we were, at such great personal cost to himself. He was a crippled and broken body with a highly intelligent cybernetic mind connected deep into the network of society itself. A guide or a caretaker to see humanity through this, the technological dark ages. The dream, of course, was that we somehow collectivism could lead to people being able to self-actualize to their highest potential as human beings. The machine, artificial intelligence, automation and analysis by human experts like Titan could really bring humanity to a fully automated, highly advanced communist society. However, in truth, rather than a truly classless society, it developed into a two-tier system society of technocrats. Analysts and engineers, like Titan, commonly referred to as the tech administrative class, and the new underclass, anyone unlucky to either not have the technical ability of the complex machinery, or else too poor or destitute to pull themselves out of the gutter. Of course, the Overseer had worked to analyse the best plans that could be developed as a society to pull all people up to the level of the technical class, but it was a slow process and thousands daily were dying from poverty. The bigger the hive, the more people strive. Mass death now just another measurement device on a text dashboard, another abstraction in a heat-deaf universe. The Overseer's eyes were connected everywhere, and though he was never seen physically by many, save the most elite engineers, the monitors that blared his image everywhere repeated the story, his struggle to become a synthesis of man and machine. His nerve endings extended out for hundreds of miles from his huge brutalist fortress, a networked super being reaching into the minds of souls of all, a living god, a blueprint for the evolution of man. Those close to the Overseer were whispered that he'd be freely offered to sacrifice himself and his sanity his body battered and broken so that he may usher in a better, more godlike mastery of the universe for mankind by integrating further and further with technology. He had in many ways made himself a living post-human experiment, and he had accepted that burden with full knowledge that would cripple his physical body for as long as the machines could keep him alive. His history was shrouded in mystery, as during the so-called pre-mass network Dark Age, the world was embroiled in utter chaos, competing economic and political tribes and systems fighting meaningless territorial wars and battles, nation-states dividing against each other, ideological frenzy, meaningless man battling for their flag to place in the ruined wasteland the world became. It was a world of horror and strife, a world where a new idea, a new way was struggling to be born from the ashes. And it was from this wasteland the Overseer emerged, a battle veteran of the skirmishes mankind had been fighting for generations. He came from a scientific and engineering background, and was described as a mix of an inquiring mind and a hardened warrior poet. The Overseer was well versed in the harsh realities of what strife can do to men when all is set against him, and what in turn men can do to his fellow man when scarcity and power rule in men's hearts. The Overseer thought humanity ought to evolve, and thus the age of the mass network began. Slowly but surely, as the Overseer gradually began to subsume the world under his wires. A process that may have taken 100, 1,000, or 10,000 years. There were gaps in the archives. Thought Titan. To think how far we have come, how much we have struggled, the billions who had died, mankind mangled to oblivion by the harshest of the winds howling outside. How the Overseer had with great cost to himself suffered, taking on the sufferings of mankind onto his body, so as to extend a hand to us that we may also reach the heavens someday in our own unique way. But there was a splinter in Titan's mind, a seed of doubt that gave him pause to think, and this splinter was bothering him. He felt like having a smoke, so taking a break from his interface, he headed up the staircase of his block to his favourite spot for smoking and thinking, to get in touch with his inner soul. Titan's eyes looked over the all too familiar landscape from the top of his flat. A collage of angled planes and tall tower blocks housing the administrative class, and further beyond some government buildings in the next sector. A strew of concrete blocks touching the sky. Titan took a long drag on his cigarette, staring into the clouds above, inhaling deeply, lost in the moment, reflecting on it all. The girl from the cafe, the world he was in, his place in this machine. All men are ultimately cogs, he thought to himself. But if the machine is a good one, which helps as many people as possible, well, I think I can live with it. Suddenly, a loud, explosive boom reverberated from the streets below, breaking his reflection. The moment broken as Titan was sent slipping backwards from the force. As he tumbled to the ground, falling on his back awkwardly, as a huge arc of an explosive fireball spiraled above. His vision blurred as he saw the chaos that began to reign on the streets below. A brief split second of silence descended before the sound of sirens and screams punctuated the air. Peace in this damned world was a valuable commodity, and for now it would seem likely to be a distant memory once again. Titan pulled himself up from the concrete block and descended down the elevator back to his flat, speedily checking on the latest updates on his government-issued feed. It was going to be a long few weeks, as terrorist attacks were always treated with zero tolerance. There would be trials, public executions, betrayals, and mass hysteria. It was going to be a dark and difficult time, at least for a while. Titan would be ordered to don his Inquisitor's robes to search for those who would undermine the Overseer and cause harm to the world they were trying to build from the ashes of the ruined old one. They were all trapped. Melanie sat alone in a high-rise flat with the monitors flashing white, black and red as she smoked a cigarette in the dim darkness, punctuated only by the flashing from the screens, a series of violent images playing endlessly on a loop. Terrorists in the area, Keep on high alert. The Overseer will see all as well. Do not be alarmed. She looked out the window distantly and lost in thought, detached from it all. The familiarity of the violence around them. It disturbed her deeply that she was so calm while surrounded by such disorder. The monitor continued to play out the slideshow, the hollow voice echoing out. The Overseer will see that all is well. What a load of bollocks, she sighed. Time to clear my head and go for a walk. And with that, Melanie walked out of a small, dimly lit flat, her black cat Exeter meowing softly as it went to rest on the floor. Coiled up in the noir dimness, red and white flickering fear on the monitors, looping endlessly. Terrorists in the area, please remain indoors. Adepts of the state will be with you all within the hour. The loudspeaker rang out from the central comm station. Titan donned his thick dark cloak, a loathsome appendage that felt like it weighed a ton. He was horrified with himself to put it on every time it was necessary. The Overseer's horrendous zombie gaze screamed like an apparition from the monitor, a metronome dead tone echoing through Titan's mind, as if an evil monk soaked in blood was screaming in his ears. This robe will be my tomb if I'm not careful, Titan thought before his attention returned to the screaming corpse. Find out who did it. Find out who did it at all costs. The cost if your units fail will be your own lives. We must protect our peace. You must crush the radicals. Search, inquire, and if necessary, erase. My word is final. This was going to be messy, and Titan did not want it to be so. But thinking of the balance, he donned his Inquisitor's robes and opened the door, falling down the abyss of his apartment staircase. As screens everywhere broadcast images of suspects with wanted flashing and strobing in red, white, and black. Breckstein ran out to join his comrades with a cheap pistol hidden in his scruffy combat jacket, running down the neon streets to gather near the dull flame. Inquisitors and civilians running around in a kind of fragmented chaos, like schools of fish running from a hungry shark, the sense of imminent violence lingering in the air. It is time, he muttered to himself under his breath as he moved forward on this mission to free the people from the evil of the Overseer's grip. Time to overthrow the bastards that rule over this desolate wasteland of a world. Time for revolution, whatever the cost may be, he thought to himself as his steps cascaded with thunder in the oily darkness of the night. Melanie was walking around the vicinity of the dull flame on a nighttime walk, trying to avoid as much trouble as possible. The sound of distant shouting and the occasional scream punctuating the nebulous urban prison they were all in. Screams within the void of the present. What madness drove us to this, she thought to herself as she slowly wandered around the emptiness of what mankind had done to a perfect world. What beast is it in man that drove us from our Eden? The old religious ones had a word for it. Lucifer, Satan, so many names driven into the trees, so much insanity and division, so much industrial metal built around the roots of a beautiful tree. Her pontification stopped as an unstoppable object meets an immovable force, as she spotted a familiar lank figure in the distance, gathering with a crowd of men, raising voices, shouting and screaming with bile. Death to the Overseer, they shouted. Death, death, death. They chanted like sick children, bleating sheep being led to the slaughter. Melanie felt a sense of deja vu as the fear began to rise from her stomach. I suppose man will always be man, she sighed. Titan sprinted with his team of Inquisitors as they passed through the blocks around them, performing eye and facial scans, interrogating everyone they came across room by room, every word analysed for accuracy, every sentence scanned on their analytical machines for a whiff of data. The cybernetic hope inverted on himself, he thought, as they moved to the next room, his fellow Inquisitors opening the door with a swipe of a card. They entered the dark room in a methodical, menacing manner, scanning the area with their augmented reality headsets. Their field of view overlaid with information connected to the Overseer himself, a live, collected mind searching for the sickness within itself. The cog in a finely tuned machine. Blue and green, neon lights of data dancing around with a taste of violence. A malevolent fury. Show yourself, the Inquisitor to the left of Titan shouted, the gun at his side feeling heavier than before. We know you are here. Show yourself. As the helmets collectively read a single life form present in the room, its heartbeat slow, pulsing in the headsets. The room itself was a shabby, messy space, adorned with arcane computer equipment, obscure computer code flashing on and off on various computer monitors, surrounded by bizarre sketches and scribblings, expressionistic and menacing figures winking and screaming from each artwork, creating an atmosphere not unlike a carnival of demons. A dull, deadpan laughter echoed through the small, dim space. A sinister tone to it, like a sick soul languishing. A dark-eyed figure emerged slowly in the dim, his face flickering in the dark under the dim light of candles. So you've come for me, I suppose? The figure chuckled in a menacing manner as Inquisitors tightened the grip on their guns, edging closer to the cloaked figure, ready to fire. Freeze! They collectively shouted, their guns ready to offload at any minute. I am frozen. As are you, the voice whispered back to them with a chilling tone. The Inquisitors froze for a second before the carnival began, their monitors filling with violent visions in their headsets, a cold, green static clouding their eyesight, and a voice of cackling insanity ringing in their headsets. Titan had managed to rip his headsight from his head when the first Inquisitor fell. As the other bureaucrats writhed and screamed on the floor, the sound of a whirlwind of violence and death echoing through the chambers as gunfire shots rang out through the corridors. Titan fell to the ground in fear, cowering from the maelstrom around him as a figure draped in black like a shadow ran past him. And Titan caught a quick and terrible glimpse of his face, contorted and full of scars, bold and brimming with violence. The shadowy man ran past him like a bolt of lightning flashing through a dark night, an ecstatic psychopathic grin wide on his broken face, maniacal in its megalomania, giggling in the darkness. Brexton and his comrades were shouting and screaming in the night. Arise! The time is now! Arise! Revolution! It crackled through the air, a word intoned with power as the crowds gathered with pace. Brechstein at the head of the mob, shouting and screaming into the void, fires and flares firing everywhere. Brechstein's eyes glowed with revolutionary zeal, as a flame no longer dull burned bright under his glasses. His dedication to the cause now put to the test. This is it, he thought to himself as the city began to burn around him. Inquisitors and the radicals engaging in skirmishes, their battle cries rising like a chorus of fallen angels, angels who were there for one purpose, to topple God from his rotten throne. Titan ran from the block of flats in a flurry and ripped off his Inquisitor's cloak, feeling heavier than a knight's armour, a knight who no longer wanted to be weighed down with the weight of his chainmail. He headed to the dull flame and saw a familiar face flickering in the flames in the distance. A head of jet black hair and a face full of solemn grace. Melanie, he shouted out in the darkness of light as she turned to him in shock, her eyes flickering like a cat, squatting outside the dull flame's door. Melanie, he said as he approached closer, her eyes brimming with fear, looking traumatized as explosions began to rain down from every block, screams continuing to pierce the night. Melanie, we have to find a safe place, he said as he approached her slowly. The city is falling. We have to escape somewhere. Anywhere. The sirens blaring, the noise of war ringing through the air. Where? She shouted back as gunfire and explosions continued to rage around them. Titan thought for a second, knowing the dull flame had a basement where they stored alcohol. To the basement, he said, grabbing her hand as he ran downstairs, running from the revolution raging above. The fire burnt out, and all that was left was a smoking dust, and a quiet light lit by neon shimmering lights. A couple held and comforted each other, watching a few of their favourite films on the television before falling asleep in each other's arms, taking in the heat of each other in love. It was 2 a.m. in the morning and Titan awakened, rising to get a glass of milk as Exeter purred around their flat. He grabbed his phone to check the updates on the news as a holographic three-dimensional face of Brechstein projected out looking at him with his trademark beady eyes, and the article's audio was read aloud about the need for some more enhanced surveillance as long as the people were okay with it. Chuckled Titan cynically. Well, nothing ever changes. But at least I found my flame.